everyone. Welcome to another episode of High Stakes with Steve Rozenberg. And this is the show that we talk about real life, real business, and real situations. So I get a lot of people that ask me, what is it like when you're flying an airplane and you know that you have 300 and 350 lives on board, and sometimes you're in a pressure cooker in a metal tube in the sky? And sometimes things can go great, and other times they can go a little bit off the deep end when you get a bunch of people together in a tube for anywhere between 10 to sometimes 17 hours on the flights that I do. And I always think it's interesting to see what causes people to think and act a certain way when they're in a certain situation, and then they think and act a different way in another situation. And so the guest I have on today, I'm super excited to have him because of his wealth of knowledge and his experience. But I'd really like to dissect some of the challenges that people do on a daily basis, and kind of like what gives people the right to think that they can do certain things when they're in a certain setting and not, and what gives them the ability and the mindset to go through these iterations mentally. So the guest I have today is Dr. Christian Conte, and we have several mutual friends, actually. And I always think that whenever someone's name comes up to me multiple times and they're like, Steve, you got to have this guy on your show. You guys are going to get along. Well, you look the same, number one, but number two, you guys are going to get along really well. And you guys are going to have a great conversation about wherever the hell the conversation goes. So Dr. Conte, first of all, thank you for being on today. I really appreciate you taking the time.
Most definitely. I appreciate you having me. I'm looking forward to it for sure.
Yeah. Well, I just want to dig into this because I know that's what people want to know. So just kind of, your resume of who you are, what you've done, all your accolades. If you could just give us a quick rundown of that, and then I want to dig into this conversation.
Well, as I get older, I realize that's not quick. So I'll just give an executive summary. Look, I always say when I go places, I could tell you all the degrees and all that kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, if what I say doesn't resonate with you, it doesn't really matter. But so for longest time, I wouldn't even really introduce myself. But then I thought, well, I got to find some balance. So I'm a licensed professional counselor. I'm a level 5 anger management specialist. Only a handful of us in the world that have reached that point. I specialize in working with people convicted of violent crimes. I created a theory back in the 90s now, an evidence-based approach to communication called yield theory. My latest book, Walking Through Anger, is all about that. I like to write a lot. I've written 10 books. I've done I stopped counting after 20,000 clinical counseling hours. So, one-on-one groups. I work with professional sports teams. NBA, I work with NFL players. I work in maximum security prisons. So like I always say, like I work with celebrities on TV and everyday people who are struggling. So here's my tagline. This will kind of sum it up. I really, after all this time, specialize in some of the most intense stuff in humanity, and seeing thousands of people from all over the world. To me, the world boils down to two kinds of people. And this is it. If you got a pen and pad, write it down. But there are people who have issues and dead people. So that's it. You have issues.
Yeah. 100%.
Right. So we all have issues. And my role is to help bring peace to people, and not in just some fluffy sit around sing Kumbaya way, but in a very genuine way. How do we strive for that moment of clarity and peace? And we're all looking for it. Like we're all looking for it. And so what I do is I'm a guide to help people along the way, and I'm right here in it with you. I've always looked at that as my role. I'm right here with everybody as I go through things, as we go through this experience of life.
So, all right, I've just got I have a lot of questions, but how does somebody, as a little kid, did you grow up thinking this is what I want to do with my life, or did something project you down this path?
Well, I think as a child, I wanted to be a professional athlete. I was really big into sports, and athletics were the primary part of my life growing up. I knew that if I didn't play sports, I really wanted to be a professor. My dad was a college professor. He taught for 40 years. He was he was a professor of English literature for 15 years, and then he And then in the middle of that career, he changed over and became a professor of earth sciences. That got a different degree. And so and for the rest of his career, he then spent teaching earth science. So he's just, my mom was an English teacher. So I grew up with parents who really pushed me academically, intellectually my whole life. And so really all the effort that I put into sports and wanting to be a professional, when I didn't make it as a professional, I just put all that effort into studying and learning, and read voraciously. And I've loved this path ever since.
So you're doing it more of a love of what you want to do, not some people I've talked to that have a passion of something along these lines, not exactly, but they'll do it because maybe something happened to them and they've had an issue and they said, you know what, I don't want this to happen to anyone else, or whatever their own story or issues are personally caused them to go down this path. But you did it because you just started going down this path and kind of down this rabbit hole, so to speak, or is that?
Yeah, no, that's it. And I think that throws a lot of people off, because people are waiting for somebody in the field of psychology to say, what was your issue? What was your struggle that you now turn it into a passion? Look, when I was young, I was a teenager. I was a know-it-all, a little hothead teenager, as any teenager usually is. And I remember one time saying to my dad, he studies earth science, teaches geology. And I said, what makes you interested? What makes that interesting to study rocks? And he looked at me and he said, look, if you're only going to live on one planet your entire life, don't you think you got to get to know that planet? And I said, wow, that's powerful. And it moved me. And then when I was in college and I was trying to figure out what to study, I thought about his advice and I thought, well, let me take it just slightly differently. And I thought, if I'm only ever going to live with me my whole life, don't I think I ought to get to know myself? And so that's when I went into psychology, and I loved it. I was fascinated with learning about the human psyche. And then, from the start, I really wanted to be able to get in, and I loved sports. I do sports psychology. I love that. It's all fascinating, but I really loved just mental health, like being able, I interned at a mental health facility from the very beginning. And I just was so enthralled and humbled that people would allow me into their lives and share the depths of their psyches with me. And so I always held that as an honor. And I believed that it was my responsibility to learn everything I could possibly learn. And I used to say to my students, I was a tenured professor at the University of Nevada. I loved that, loved teaching, loved that part of my career. We can talk a little bit about that. But I used to say to my students, I teach master's students or doctoral students who were going on in counseling, marriage and family therapy, psychology, all that. And I would say to them, look, if you ever ask me what's going to be on the test, you can just hit the door, because you don't belong in this program, because you need to know everything. Like, which client are you going to sit across from in the future and sacrifice and say, you know what, your issue, I didn't really study that issue. I didn't really pay attention to that part. No, you got to, these are human lives we're dealing with, and it's as honorable as it gets.
So let me ask you this: is what you do, you help, obviously, like you said, you help sports athletes, people, everyday people, and then people that have, made some decisions in their life and they're, institutionalized. Would you say that you're doing this to help people find their good side or to fight their bad side? Like what is kind of your cause in life? Where the North Star for you when you find someone?
To me, it's about peace. It's about finding peace. So I think good and bad are just judgments on the same side, on the two different sides of the same coin. So for me, it's about learning. It's about awareness. The fancy word is consciousness. So to become more conscious. But ultimately, it's about helping people find awareness, and doing that through insight. And I created this theory, yield theory. It's very powerful. It's about how to get around people's fight or flight response and speak in ways that can be heard. I love what you said at the onset. Here you are up in the air, thousands of feet up in the air, in this machine that's like we're tightly in there. You got people from all over, and it's scary. So there's fear. And how do we cover up fear? We cover it up with anger. How do we cover up sadness? With anger. So you got all this in this really enclosed space. And so you have dealt with your whole career, no doubt, highly emotional, highly charged situations. And to give people insight, to help them understand why. Like, for instance, just listen, if people listen to not one more moment of this than this next statement, this is life change. Imagine if you understood that your mind always wants to match your body. So you're up in a plane, you feel really anxious, you have fear, but you don't understand that that's why you're getting so agitated so quickly. You want to lash out in anger. But the truth is, when you lash out in anger, your body's flooded with endorphins. So you actually feel better. But when you're in anxiety, your body has all this excess cortisol. So it makes sense neurologically why you want to lash out in anger, get those endorphins kicking. But if you were mindful of this, if you were aware or conscious of it, you wouldn't have to unconsciously lash out at others. You could simply find more effective ways to process it. That's how life-changing this stuff is. That's why at 48, I'm still fired up about what I do, because that could change somebody's life to understand that.
So let me ask you this. You mentioned something in the beginning of that sentence. You said you help people find peace. Would it be safe to say that everyone has a different definition of their peace based on, is it based on their upbringing, based on, the surrounding environment, different cultures? How do you find their peace and do you try to make it not necessarily your peace, but your view of it? Or how do you find that equilibrium that gets them in the equal spot, I guess you could say?
So that's a great, great question. So when people begin to train to become professional counselors or psychologists, one of the first things they'll say is they'll get into the field. They say, I'm really good at giving advice. So that's why my friends want me to my family want me to get into this field. And one of the eye-opening things day one in their first class is, this is not about giving advice based on your life. Like, your life story was your life story. That's one perspective out of more than 7 billion. So it's not about how do I get them to have my picture of life or peace. It's about genuinely meeting them where they are and finding out what that is for them. And when I say this piece, again, we have silly images sometimes in our minds of people sitting around singing and all that kind of campfire. But what I'm saying is this, I do work in prisons. I'm really proud that the Pennsylvania Department of Corrections officially adopted yield theory. So I train 18,000 employees in yield theory. Officers are trained in it so they can be prepared to handle the intensity of the emotions they face. Every incarcerated individual goes to one of these programs. But one of the things I say is this. So I remember one time I went out into this maximum security prison during blockout. And so this is their time to be able to watch maybe a movie on the community TV, maybe play some games. But you have about 120 inmates, again, level 4 institution, a fairly dangerous place, scary for a lot of people. So I went in there, I turned off the TVs and I said, listen, I said, if I'm going to take their attention, if I'm going to get their attention, I better say something that's meaningful. I've always believed that with my career. And like you, the way you've taken, like, for the when we met, like, one of the things I loved, you talked about how you took a methodology from what you saw throughout your career as a pilot, and you helped transfer that over to businesses and take that methodology. In that same way, I say, look, the stuff I do that I'm talking about with people convicted of violent crimes, doing some of the most awful stuff most people will never even hear about. If we can get this stuff to work with them, imagine how much easier it works with you in your house and being able to everyday life. So anyway, I shut these TVs off and I said, all right, well, how am I going to grab their attention? And I said, look, I'm starting this movement and it's about 3 things. And it's inner peace, education, and legacy. And so I'll just go into the first one just for a minute to give a sense of this piece, because I think it resonates with your question. But I said, if you've ever sat with someone in hospice in a person's final moments, you'll notice that people in their final moments aren't saying, man, I wish I got over on so-and-so. Ooh, I wish I got away with this. In people's final moments, wherever they are, they want peace. That's the essence that I'm talking about. And I will say this, you know this as well as I do. Every parent knows this. What do we teach our children? If you want to get good at something, what do you got to do? Practice. And so if you know that we master what we practice, if we know this about sports, about music, well, the same is true with peace. You can't wait till that final moment and all of a sudden figure it out. Like, you can spend your lifetime trying to figure out, how am I able to handle this? And it's not about controlling the outside environment. And that's where people get into trouble. Well, if so-and-so just thought the way I think they should think, if so-and-so just did what I think they should do, then I'll have peace. No, it's about being able to have that peace regardless of what's going on around you.
Okay. So based on what you just said, I've got a follow-up question. And, when I talk to business owners, everybody wants to get to that point where they think they're going to break through this glass ceiling and maybe they're going to be in this imaginary club that doesn't exist of all these successful people patting them on the back and welcoming them, which we all know does not exist. And I always explain, part of what you're doing is enjoying the journey, or at least embracing the journey of who you are becoming along the path of building a business or whatever it is you're doing, a bodybuilding show, whatever the case may be. So in light of that, right, of that conversation, how do you get people to understand how to, whether it's inner peace, whether it's just happiness at home, whether it's being the best you can be as an athlete, how do you get them to understand that it's not the destination, but it's the journey? I guess first question is, do you agree with that it's not the destination, it's the journey? And if so, how do you get people to understand that model?
Yeah, absolutely. Of course, it's about the journey. That's what that's what life is.
Right.
People who struggle with depression primarily live in the past. People who struggle with anxiety primarily live in the future, but people who can find the most contentment live in the present moment. So yeah, it is about the journey. It's about this right now. I love the way you even phrased it, because if someone asked me, how do I get somebody to do something? My real powerful answer is I don't. My job isn't to get people to do anything. My job is to hold up a mirror, and if it's right for people, I'll offer information. If it's right for them in their journey, take it. If not, it's no big deal. Like, it's not me to control anybody's destination or journey. But if I were to do it, like, there's an old saying, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. But you can put salt in his oats and make him pretty darn thirsty. And a lot of what I do is put metaphorical salts in people's oats to try to want them to become it. So that when I say that, again, this central concept of peace, it is that relationships at home, it's at business. How do we communicate effectively? Like, we want to give feedback to others, but we have to get around that defensiveness. So if you're running a business and you're trying to give feedback to your employees, and you're not able to do it because they get so defensive, there are a couple things that are happening. One, the way you're delivering that information might be eliciting something. And two, the way they're receiving that information might be defensive for a reason. And so we have to figure out from all angles. I've always believed that. From day one and doing Mary's Family, I'll never forget my first couple I worked with. I was young. Listen, if this is going to be video and people are going to see this, they can see me now. I'm 6 feet, 260, right? Listen, you have to picture this. When I first started counseling, I was skinny. I had hair. My wife got the raw end of that deal. My wife's a supermodel. I gained 100 pounds and then no hair and all that stuff. But it's funny. But when I remember I first saw a couple, and the wife came first, and she came in. So I started talking to her, and I was like, young. We're talking about 25 years ago. So I said, well, when she starts talking, I get this picture of her husband, like, man, I can't believe he does all this and that. When he got there, I had enough insight, at least. I was, in school, but I had enough insight to realize, well, I gave her time, I should give him time. Right. So I bring him in, and he starts talking while she's out there. And I'm like, wow, I can't believe she does all of that. And that was kind of a wonderful metaphor for early on experience to understand that everyone plays a role in every interaction that we have. So again, it's not about good or bad, right or wrong. For me, it's simply about effectiveness. Are you effective? If you want to communicate, do you do it effectively, or are you ineffective? And so often people would rather be right and have their ego. Well, I told them. Great, you told them. You didn't change anything, but you told people. And so that's more about ego. And so that is a battle. It's a heck of a battle that we all have to confront, that battle with ego.
So interesting you bring that up, because in flight training, a lot of times that if there's an airplane crash or disaster, they will eventually break down the steps of what happened in the crash to show us the red flags that happened along the way. And I believe the number is somewhere between 7 and 9 statistical. There's red flags that will happen along the journey of the flight that will actually cause the accident. Maybe they missed a radio call. Maybe the two guys weren't talking. They saw the wrong aircraft, but they actually link it back to ego and pride of the pilots a lot of times, without trying to admit that they made a mistake. That not as much anymore, but especially back when they were trying to figure out, they called it CRM, crew resource management, to try to get us to get along in the cockpit and communicate that, not one person was above another person. If we're coming in and one guy says, go around, you go around, because you don't know what he's seeing. And many times people would not go around. And there was a huge accident in Tenerife that in the Canary Islands. There was a KLM 747, and there was another aircraft that was taxiing across the runway. It was a very foggy morning. The KLM was taking off, 2 747s full, 450 people in each aircraft. And the junior first officer said, I don't think we're cleared for takeoff. And the guy said, we're good to go. put the throttles up to it. They took off. They ran right into the other aircraft that was crossing the runway, killed everybody. I mean, I think everybody died on that in that scenario. The first thing KLM did is they said, we need to call the chief pilot and get the chief pilot down there. Guess who was the one that put the throttles up on the aircraft? It was the chief pilot.
Wow.
And they started realizing, okay, maybe there's something to this where the hierarchy, this guy was too nervous to say anything because he was a new hire. This guy was the chief pilot. And so the ego, they always say ego and pride is the biggest inhibitor of a successful flight or business success as far as that goes.
But that's, first of all, I appreciate you sharing that. That's a very powerful story, and it's very true. Like, oftentimes we get so defensive, or people like to say, if they're talking about ego, well, so I'm talking about it, so I understand it, so I must not be dealing with it. No, we're all dealing with it all the time, and it's something we need to check. So I speak all over, right? And I'm a storyteller. I like to tell Zen tales and different stories. And there's an old story about this professor, and he goes in to see this Zen master, and this professor's kind of haughty, egoic, and he's like asking him questions about Zen. Da, 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 da. Well, he just keeps asking these questions, doesn't really allow the Zen master to say anything. So the Zen master starts pouring him some tea, and the cup is, he starts pouring the tea and pouring the tea. Professor's still talking. So the cup starts to overflow. Professor's like, whoa, 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 man, the cup's overflowing. And the Zen master said that cup is like your mind. As long as it's filled up, there's going to be no room to put anything new in it. If you really want to understand, you've got to empty your cup. So this is a story that most people are pretty familiar with, right? It's a very common story. And about 7 or 8 years ago, I was in my meditation room, and I'm looking through some books, and I come across this story. And I just was about to flip the page. I mean, I was thinking, I've written about this story. I've done videos on this story. I've taught this story for many years. So I just went to flip the page, and it hit me. My cup was full. I thought I already knew the story. And I sat and I really reread it, and I really sat with it. And then I didn't just get it here, but I got it so much deeper here. And it reminds me, when I do trainings, like I teach people, empty your cup. Because you're going to want to say, oh, I already know that, or I already do that. But when we truly empty our cup, this is a profound skill. So could you imagine if the business owner is able to empty his or her cup and say, teach me what you're seeing. Teach me what you're seeing. I want to know it, rather than, no, you're doing this. It radically changes the communication. And when you do that, you lead with humility, and you can circumvent people's fight or flight responses, and you can speak in ways that can actually be heard.
Is that along the lines, like, let's say I read a book and then I reread the book, and maybe 2 years later I read it again and I get something that I never saw, or it didn't hit me, or I'll say something, it doesn't mean anything. Someone else says it and they're like, that's amazing. I'm like, I said the same thing, but it's maybe they just were not ready for the message. And so their cup was full, maybe when they talked to me, and then for whatever reason in life, it was empty when they got to them.
That's it. I think there's a time when we're ready to receive information, and that's part of it. And the other part of it is we reinforce it. Just like you don't do push-ups one time and you get strong, you have to keep doing it over and over again. Same thing intellectually. You keep looking at it. This is why some of the greatest teachers throughout history would teach with parables, because you can take a single parable and you can reflect on it, meditate on it your entire life, and you will always learn something deeper about it. I love what you talked about and what you taught just a few minutes ago about that CRM, the crew resource management. That taught me something new. I appreciate learning that. I talk about the box, and I say, just take a box. And now in the Pennsylvania Department of Corrections, they call it the Conte box, but it really is just a box. And I say this, in any given moment, we can all see two sides of a box in any given moment at most as human beings. So that means there are always 1 to 2 sides that we cannot see. So if someone's standing on the other side of that box, if we truly want to know what's on the other side of that box, and let's imagine even further, each side of the box has ever moving pictures, random pictures. If we truly want to know what's on that side of the box, we have to be humble and ask, teach me what you're seeing from your side. But all too often, ego says, man, I've been all around that box. I already know what it is. And that's your cup's filled up. And again, if you can toss that cup, empty that cup, and listen, my gosh, it changes things. It doesn't make you less than to be humble and listen. It doesn't mean you have to change. Many leaders, I do a lot of leadership work, And many leaders will think, well, if I admit I'm off, then they're going to think I'm weak. No, that's a sign of strength to own I don't have the complete picture. I need you all to help me have the complete picture. That's a sign of strength.
So I want to, and I completely agree with that. And again, from being trained, at least from Boeing and the airlines over the last 30 years, there's obviously a lot of humility, and there's a lot of, hey, you know what, there's no such thing as a dumb question. Especially from my career, when we're flying in different countries with different languages, backside of the clock, there's a lot of exterior factors that we have to deal with. So we always know and check the ego at the door, because there's a lot of things going on that we're not in our safe, comfortable environment. I mean, when we go into, something simple, when we go into China, for example, when we're flying into China, into Beijing and other cities there, we operate in feet. Well, they operate in meters. So we have to convert when they'll say descend to, 9,360 meters. And you're like, what was that? Okay, we got to get out. So now you're out of a zone and you're trying to listen to the language differences. So if some guy just says, one of the other pilots, like, hey, I know what that is, just do it this way, everyone else would look at him like, dude, that's not like, we don't do it that way. And so it's interesting what you're saying, just from my perspective of being a pilot, how I've learned the ego and pride situation. And unfortunately, how often do business owners and people run their lives proverbially into the side of a mountain or their business because they want to show that they're right, and they want to have the pride, and they want to be the one that's no one's going to tell me. And I'm sure you see it all the time, that if you retrace the steps, there's probably very clear flags that popped up for them.
Over and over again. I mean, over and over again. It is that sense of I need to show people what I know. Like, I remember it would be interesting because we would get students to come in to apply to be into the master's program for counseling or marriage and family therapy, and they would be very excited and humble and like, I'm really well aware I don't know anything. Well, then after they would get out through a master's degree and we would interview people for a PhD program, they were very much in a state across the board. This happened a lot, where they would say they would want to show what they already know. So for them, they felt like, because they were insecure, because they really hadn't gotten a lot more knowledge yet. And so when you're in that dangerous area where you learn something, your ego kicks in and you go, well, I want to make sure I let everybody know what I know. And that's a natural part of development and intellectual development. So again, it's not right or wrong, good or bad. And it's not like I have a judgment for people. We've all gone through it, but it is something to be mindful of, because like you said, there are business owners out there right now who they recognize there's a voice there's a voice that's saying, listen, but something in them says, no, I can't. And I believe that's ego that says, no, I'm show them I'm right. They need to know who's boss.
Yeah.
Well,
And I see, people that I work with and speaking at events, and I talk to people and I tell them the stories, and they'll come up after and they're like, man, that is me. Like, that's my problem. Like, I felt like you were talking directly to me, shining a light on me, because I felt like you were telling my story through an airline story or some other business story, but that was me. And, I think it's sometimes, again, like you said, maybe their cup was empty when I happened to walk in, and I was disarming because I'm not in their industry, if it's roofing or dental or plumbing, but I'm telling them my story, and maybe their guard is down and they're willing to listen to me because I'm so different. I don't know.
I think that though, but I think you hit the nail on the head. I think when we're less threatening, if somebody's not in their perceived mind, if they're in competition with you, and when you realize that you're not in competition with people, like your success, being able to thrive with and praise other people's success and learn from it doesn't make you less than. Like, it will really help you. But I do think, and I bet just from your brief saying that right now, somebody comes up and they think, well, I wasn't a pilot, so I don't have to feel threatened that that's how he got this intelligence. So I can say, yes, I'm ready for it. Whereas if somebody else is a pilot and they're starting to get it, they're like, well, I knew that too. And, rather than being able to be open to that, you have a really beautiful, insightful way for people to learn from.
Well, it's funny because I had a gentleman reach out to me and ask me if I would be willing to speak on stages, which I do, as you do, at different events. And this was in the financial industry. And he says, well, I'm not really sure, how I can get you into this industry because you're not into finances. I'm like, I am 100% not into finances. Like I would be the worst person for that. I'm like, I'm almost what an opportunity switch. I'm nothing like that. I am completely unassuming to that world. But what I do bring in is this. And when I told it to him and explained to him, he was like, okay, I see now. He's like, I was trying to fit you in with, you don't have any credentials, you don't have anything behind your name in the financial world. So I don't see how I can get you that people would want to hear from you. And so just that alone was like, oh, okay, you're actually more marketable because you're not into this industry. And people would love to hear your story about that.
I really feel that. Like as you said, I really feel that because people will sometimes say, well, these anger management are just in the prison stuff. And I'm like, no, this is life. Like I work with Fortune 500 companies. I'm talking about this is everyday life. That's why I say there are two kinds of people. And my approach, like I'm looking at you, we're very similar in that. I wore my nice t-shirt for you. I'm a t-shirt and
So
jeans
did
guy.
I.
If I'm on TV, if I'm speaking at an international convention, I'm the same no matter what. I've always just been that. And I believe that it's very disarming for people. When I come in, oftentimes from the work I do in prisons to the work I do with athletes, I come in and I do believe it's disarming. And oftentimes, like I remember one time when I was young and I came in to speak at this place, and I first started my speaking career in my 30s. And I remember I was at this place that brought me in, and this guy was like really talking to me real nice. And he's like, man, this guy's going to be awesome. Like he's written books and like he's done all this work, and I'm excited to meet him. And I realized he didn't know I was Dr. Conte. And so I was like, man, I hope so. I heard he's good. I was, what time he's coming? And he's like, I don't know. I thought I was supposed to be directing him in. I guess you're with him. And I said, yeah. I said, I tell you what, I better introduce him real quick. And I stood up and he was like, oh my goodness, like that's you. I didn't know that was you.
That's funny. That's funny. I've got a question. I kind of want to go back a little bit to some of the other stuff because I'm very curious. So if we talk about someone who's let's just say an athlete, let's say it's a Michael Jordan, right? Somebody going through their life being a Michael Jordan. And then you have someone in a similar track of someone who's let's say a gangbanger or a criminal. I grew up in a pretty bad area of East Los Angeles as a kid. It's not the way it is today. It was much different when I grew up, but it was not a very good area. And I knew many friends that took different paths in life. I'm sure as you have as well. And then you have a third person who's the CEO. So you've got three people on these different tracks. My question is I would assume each one of them is trying to basically be the best they could be. One's trying to be the best athlete. One's trying to be the best gangbanger. One's trying to be the best CEO. Is everybody on the path thinking that they're doing the right thing in their mind? Like, how does everybody, you don't get many crossover, right? In general, people are staying in their track. So what causes people to stay in that track to end up maybe in the, NBA, maximum prison, or Fortune 500 company? What is it that keeps that drive going with these people? Is it similar?
I do think it's similar. I think there is a drive to be the best at what we do. I think that's a wonderful, positive motivator. Unfortunately, sometimes the goal is to be the best at getting over on people, to be the best at manipulating and tricking people. I talked to a guy in finance once, and he was like, man, I just know when I got them, and then I can do anything I want with their money. I was like, man, does that make you feel good about that? And unfortunately it did in that conversation for that particular person. But like some people's mindset is, how can I get over? Others will say, how can I just master my craft? And I think that when you channel your energy in the right direction, I do think who you surround yourself with matters. Like all too often people get to a certain level and they're surrounded with so many yes people. So I remember one time I was speaking with the Washington Wizards, and I said to them, who's your no? Who's your no? Who's your person that when you give your good idea, they look at you and go, no, that's a dumb idea. Because if you don't have people in your life telling you some of your ideas are dumb, then you have a bunch of yes people around you. And that's dangerous because now you're thinking that you're really insightful about everything you talk about. And I believe that can be really dangerous. I'm blessed. I've been married for 20 years. My wife is definitely a no person for me, and she's the greatest gift that could ever happen to me. But she'll often, challenge any ideas that I'm coming up with, and my parents are the same way. I still very close with them, and they can challenge ideas, and I think that's so healthy. So find your no in life for sure. Find your person that's telling you, because if all your ideas are great to everybody around you, boy, you're in trouble.
What are your thoughts of compartmentalizing? This is what I say, and I could be way off. So I'd like to hear your perception. So I was taught that you have 3-minute friends, 3-hour friends, 3-week friends, and then forever friends. So the 3-minute friends are people maybe you work with or you see at Starbucks and you're in passing and you really don't care about them. They don't care about you. You're just exchanging pleasantries and then you move on. The 3-hour friends are maybe people that you work with or you're in the same industry. Maybe you go to networking events with each other, happy hours, maybe a dinner, and that's about it. The 3-week friends are people that maybe you're family friends with. You go on family vacations. You spend maybe a week or 2 weeks with each other, weekends together, hanging out, and kids, probably not in the same industry, but you've known each other a while. And then the forever friends are the ones that you grew up with, the ones that you could call at 3 in the morning and say, hey, don't ask, I need bail money, just get here. And they hang up the phone and they're there, even if you haven't seen them in 20 years. I would not call a 3-minute friend and tell them I need bail money. Right. And the reason I bring this up is when I'm flying, when I'm in an aircraft flying, I don't talk about business because that's a different venue. When I'm at the gym, I don't talk about real estate or business. So I compartmentalize. I've learned to do this, and I don't know if it's a good thing or bad thing, but I just think not everybody wants to hear my story. Friends that I grew up with, they really don't care what I'm doing today. They may like it and proud of me, but they don't want to hear me talking about business and podcasts and these other things, and vice versa. So I've learned to compartmentalize that. I don't know if that's the right way or the wrong way to go through life, but that's how I do it. I'm curious your thoughts on that.
I mean, it sounds like it's helpful for you to recognize when people are ready to sit with or receive information or not. I think from my perspective that it's wise to know who you can talk to about certain things. I mean, that's the cornerstone of my approach with yield theory. So I think all too often, like I'll give you an example. If I'm at a gym and I'm lifting, somebody will come up and I might just say something self-deprecating because I'm in the middle of a set and trying to move to the next one, and somebody is trying to talk, and I've had experiences where I'm like, oh man, I'm just trying to lose this weight, and then all of a sudden they just start talking to me about diets and what I should be doing and talking at me, and I wasn't asking for that. I was just being nice in a social situation. And so a lot of times people misread that. They want to just tell everybody what they do, what they're about, and maybe the person doesn't even want to hear that. And so I'm very mindful of, if you ask me questions, I'm happy to talk about stuff, but I'm not going to just say something if you don't want it, if you're not ready for it. And maybe that's part of my career too, because people come to me for help, organizations come to me for help, and so then I can help. But when you talk about compartmentalizing it, I think it's smart to know, well, who can I trust, who can I not trust? I mean, I think in that way, I think it's natural. I thought you were going the direction of that, like with the compartmentalizing. You mentioned, I think maybe even at the onset, how do people get the otherwise nice people get really upset? And
Right.
part of it is persona. So we have persona, or multiple are called personae. And so, yeah, we are going to be different with our friends who we grew up with. We're going to be in a different way than we are when we're somewhere else. And the goal is to find a balance, to be genuine who you are around anyone. That is the goal. At the same time, people will take advantage of that. So somebody looking to take you down because you're successful, if you're just kind and just say something off the cuff, lighthearted, they might zero in on that to be like, I can't believe he thinks this, or and blow it up. So you do need to be mindful about who you share things with, but at the same time, you also want to strive to be yourself wherever you are.
Right. Right. Yeah, I agree. Let me ask you a question. I follow Tim Grover, right? He was Michael Jordan's trainer. And in one of his books, Relentless, he talks about people's dark side, and he talks about everyone has a dark side. Do you agree with that? Does everybody have a dark side to them?
Of course, it's called the shadow. Carl Jung, Jung, he called this part of our psyche the shadow. So the shadow part of us, think about it, the easiest way to learn about it to begin with is to picture somebody you don't like. Picture somebody that irks you to no end, that really gets to you. And then think about the qualities that that person has. What are the qualities that you don't like about that person? And the truth is, and sometimes when I'm teaching this in a big group, I'll tell everybody, close their eyes while they picture that. I tell them to open their eyes. I said, the truth is that all those qualities are qualities that are inside of you that you don't want to face. So it's easier to see those qualities in someone else. But we all have, look, the potential for everything great and the potential for everything terrible rests inside all human beings. When you look at some of the horrors of World War II, in the Nazi Germany and the concentration camps, and you think, how could somebody get to this point? It's because it's inside all people. When you look at some of the greatest healers in the history of humanity, how did they get there? Even some of the greatest healers will say, look, everything I'm doing, you can do it too. Like, the reality is the potential for everything great and terrible rests inside all of us. And the question for each of us is, what are we going to feed? What are we going to water? What are we going to develop and strengthen?
That's great. That's great. Is it, if I have we all have a dark side, not if. So my dark side, do you ignore it? Do you suppress it? Do you bring it out sometimes? Like, what do you do with this dark side? Does it propel you to greatness, or is it something that's always an inhibitor?
So I think it becomes so mysterious for so many people, and we have a tendency. There's a big fancy word called enantiodromia, which means we go from one extreme to the other. Dromedaries walking in anti-opposites. We're walking in the opposite directions. So in other words, we're like, oh, well, I can't do this because if I do this, then I'm going to go this. So somebody who's never had a drink of alcohol in their lives, they may say, I can't drink because if I drink, I'd be an extremist and I drink to the nth degree. And there's sometimes such a fear of it that we project it in our minds. You know, one of the great reasons why talk therapy is helpful is when you say something out loud, it crystallizes that idea. Sometimes we have anxieties, and anxieties, it's normal to have really wild thoughts. Like someone's flying in a plane, they have anxiety, and they're like, oh my goodness, what if the wings just fall off? Right. And then they don't want to say that. And then when they come to therapy and they say that, well, I don't want to say it. I'm like, why? You worried that the wings are going to fall off? Yeah, you know what? It's okay to have these wild thoughts. But when you say them out loud, it helps you crystallize them, and then you can kind of handle them a little bit more effectively. The same thing happens with the dark side. Joseph Campbell, one of the greatest mythologists of ever, I think he passed away in the 80s. The Hero with 1,000 Faces. He wrote a lot about mythology, comparative mythology. And he says people are sometimes so afraid of what they might become with that they're building that up in their minds. But if we turn and we face it, and we bring it to shine some light on it, we see, yeah, I could go to some dark spaces, but instead of amping that up in our minds, let's shine light on it. So I deal with some of the people who have done the most horrific things in humanity. It's not easy. This is not easy work. People who are serial murderers, serial rapists, people who do the most horrific acts of torture. And my job has been to work with people that have done this stuff and interview them and talk to them and work with, not just interview them, but work with them intensely. And what I see is that sometimes what we allow in our mind, I said this one time, I was speaking to a bunch of athletes. I was doing a leadership training, and it was University of Pittsburgh, bunch of different kids, all the different sports. I said, look, we were outside. I'm kind of a creative thinker. There was a bucket outside. I said to the kids, I said, if I give each and every one of you a bucket, what would you put in it? The kids are like, what's the context? I said, I'll just give you a bucket. What are you putting in it? Kids are like, well, cell phone. Somebody else, I'll put food in it. Okay, food. So you'd have food in your bucket. You'd have a cell phone in your bucket. Here's my point. Whatever you put in your bucket will be in your bucket. And I think, man, Doc, that's so obvious. It is, right? But the same is true with your mind. Whatever you put in your mind will be in your mind. If you fill your mind with violence, violent movies, violent video games, you're going to have violence in your mind. If you put violent thoughts on repeat in your mind, what do you think that does to your cortisol level, your amygdala, your fight or flight response? And then you could vibe on that over and over again. That's not real healthy for you. It doesn't mean never think about it, never prepare, not at all. It just means be mindful of what you're playing on repeat in your mind. So I try to shine a light on that for people, because if you don't, you can get really wrapped up in that darkness. And, your mindset gets, I have a joke. I probably should. I'm not a funny speaker. I'm more of an inspirational speaker. So I probably shouldn't have set that up.
No,
But this guy, he breaks down the side of the road, and he he breaks down the side of the road. He doesn't have a tire iron, so he has to walk up to this farmhouse. Farmhouse is way up away, so he walks and walks and walks. And as he's walking to this farmhouse, he's thinking, "Man, why am I even walking this far? By the time I get here, this dude's not going to have a tire iron." And as he gets up closer to the house, he's like, "Man, this is a beautiful house. Somebody like that's going to look at me, and they're going to be like, they're going to look down on me. I know somebody who lives in a house like this is going to look down on me." And he's walking and walking, and he gets closer to the house, and he's like, "I shouldn't even do this." But by the time he knocks on the door, the person answers the door, and he looks at him and he goes, "You can keep your stupid tire iron." Turns around and walks away. But he built it up so much in his mind of what that person was, that all of that had to do with him. Nothing of that had to do with the person at the house.
No, I have a funny story. This is a no shit real story that happened to me. So I was speaking at an event in Melbourne, Australia, and there was, a couple thousand people or whatever at this event. And I was telling my story, and I was talking about what happened to me with 9/11 and, buying a bunch of real estate and having problems and trying to figure out how to build a business and all that stuff. So I'm telling my story. And for some reason, it is, you're speaking on stage, and there's one guy that's just dead center, and he and I just keep locking eyes for whatever reason. And he just has a stone face. And at first I'm like, man, this guy is just like staring right through me. And every time I'm scanning the room talking, and I just keep locking eyes on this guy, and my mind starts going, and I'm thinking, man, this guy doesn't believe my story. And as I'm talking and I'm going through it, and he and I just keep locking, I'm like, you know what? Who the hell does this guy think he is? Like, he doesn't know me. He doesn't know. And I'm doing this whole story, right? And so by the time I'm done, I'm like, you know what? F him. Like, he doesn't even know. Like, who is he to judge me? So meanwhile, I'm doing this presentation, I'm a keynote speaker, and I'm doing this whole thing. And finally, I'm like, okay, I just need to. Me and this guy are gonna go here. We need to. Right? So I'm done with the presentation. Oh my God, it's so funny. So I'm done with the presentation. People are coming up and talking, shaking hands, blah, blah. And I turn around, and this other guy, we turn around, and we are like face to face with each other. And I'm thinking, okay, this is like Fight Club. This is like go time, right? And the guy comes up to me, and he gives me the biggest hug. And he said, I almost broke down in tears because I thought that you were basically telling my story in life. And I thought that I was all alone. And you basically showed me that I'm not basically a loser in life, and that you helped me understand that other people can get through this. And I felt so horrible, man. I was like, oh my God, I am such a piece of shit. Like, how could I think that about this guy? We never said a word to each other, but it was, it reminds me of that story. And I will never forget that as long as I live.
It's so powerful. I love that you shared that. See, I think to me that speaks volumes about you and your character, because you show that vulnerability. First of all, it's very normal for people to have thoughts like that, right? And obviously those were your own insecurities in that moment, and then to be able to break through that and see. And I've had similar experiences as a professor. Like, I definitely identify, like, I'm smiling through and through because I've had experiences like that as well. And it shakes you to your core. It shook me to my core. And when you realize that over and over again, it's what's going on in people's minds. And so to what I've done over the past, I'd say 3 years now, because this happened a couple of years ago, and I've been doing it now with this mindset, is I said, I had a woman one time who was really, really doing a similar thing. Seemed like she was whatever the information was really angering her, because seemed really angry. And so I just kept sending this, I do a meditation for people where I breathe in their pain and send back out healing to them. And I just did it the entire time as I'm speaking. If they're working in groups, I just kept doing it. I just kept doing it. So at the break, I walked up to her and I said, I want to see if you're okay. I want to see if you're doing okay. I can't help but notice that you look like you're going through something. And she broke down in tears, and she was going through a really horrific experience at home. Didn't know if she was going to be going through a divorce. And she really appreciated me checking in. And I said, but this was an experience of going through it, to say, like, I didn't take it personal in that moment. Not that I haven't tons of times, but many, many times I've done it. But I realized that people are going through something. That's why I say that tagline for me isn't just a funny line I say. I like to open up on shows and talk about two kinds of people with issues and dead people. But the truth is, I live that message and know people are going through something. And look, well, I do this YouTube channel, right? and we get 100,000 subscribers. There's people from all over the world tune in. I can post a video, and within seconds there will be likes and no likes. You couldn't have seen the video to like it. You couldn't have seen it to not like it. Like, there are people who actually follow me just to be like, I don't like it, but 99.9% of it's positive and happy. But I try to share that with people to say, it's not you. There are things going on in your life. It doesn't mean you don't offend people, you don't do things, this and that. But if you don't give people the power to offend you, you're not going to be offended by anything. That's for sure. But I mean, listen, I love listening to you. I'm so grateful to connect with you, because I love what you do. You take a path, a methodology. To me, when I listen to you about the way you do this so intentionally with your career, with piloting and channeling it in with business, it's like a counseling theory. So like when I was alluding to earlier, that when people come into counseling, the field of counseling, and they say, well, I gave good advice. No, it's not about you. It's about understanding the methodology and then meeting people where they are. So for example, if we understand that your thoughts cause your feelings, that would fall under something called cognitive behavioral therapy. Fancy word, but it's your cognitions, your actions. And no matter who comes in front of you, it's not about your story. It's about, how am I going to help them understand how their thoughts are impacting their actions, right? And there's a bunch of different methodologies. Now, yield theory is one of those methodologies. But what I love about what you've done is you've channeled this, so you have a theory, so you can kind of help people regardless of their business. And they come to you, oh, financial, you're not in finances. Yeah, but listen to what you have to say, because what you have to say is a path to success, regardless of where people are.
Yeah. I mean, I believe it's applicable to anything in life. I'll tell you one last story, and then we can start wrapping up. I got a couple questions to finish, but so one day we're flying, I'm going from Houston, Texas. We're going into Amsterdam, and there's a really bad snowstorm going on in Amsterdam. And so whenever there's bad weather, they had to plow the runway, and they basically separate out traffic to be separated out to come in and land, so they can plow the runways between arrivals. And so they put us in a holding pattern. So a holding pattern is essentially a racetrack in the sky, and they'll stack us about 500 feet on top of each other. And we're basically just making circles in the sky, waiting our turn. Now, we have a certain amount of fuel that we have to have, and then we have to have fuel to get to an alternate airport if for some reason we can't get in, and be able to land at the alternate airport. So for this situation, the alternate was Dusseldorf, Germany. That was our alternate. But the weather was so bad, it was such a big system, that the weather at Dusseldorf went down. So we're talking to operations control, and they tell us, hey, your new alternate is Milan, because the weather's good in Milan. So we recalculate the fuel. So instead of it being a 40-minute flight, it's now a 2-hour flight. And we're like, okay, so that cuts into the amount of time that we can hold. So we sit there and we're holding. And so we say, okay, hey, we only have about 15 minutes now. And then it's called bingo fuel. Like, we got to go. And so whenever that happens, like, no matter what, you're going. Even if they said, hey, you guys are next, it's like, nope, we're going. Because there's been accidents before where you don't get in, and then you don't have enough fuel to get to Milan. So we tell air traffic control, hey, we've got about 19 minutes for bingo, and we got to go. So they said, hey, we'll expedite you. We'll make you guys number one. We'll get you guys in. So I'm flying the plane, and we're coming in, and it's just one of those nights that you really don't want to be in an airplane. We're just getting the crap knocked out of us. It's snowing so bad that we can barely talk to each other because it's snow and hail really loud in the airplane, and just getting bounced, and 45 knot crosswinds. So we're coming into land, and this is the runway and this is the plane. And so we break out of the clouds, and I'm like, I don't see the runway. And he taps me on the shoulder, and he's like, it's out that window. So we're going in sideways, coming down the tube basically to land this plane. So I'm like, oh shit. So now I'm flying the plane to land it, which is, we know how to do this. I mean, it's technique. So we get it. We get it on the ground, one of those landings, and we get to the gate, and we're just like, oh man, that was good. Like, we got in, everything's good to go. The first person, we open the door in the cockpit. It's a wide body aircraft, gets off, and they're like, you guys suck. We are 20 minutes late. And I'm thinking to myself, you were almost speaking Italian and spending the night over there. Like, you have no idea. And we told him, we said, do you realize, like, we almost had to divert to Milan, and you guys weren't going to get anywhere in this. And then there's like, oh my God, you guys are amazing. It's just so funny how quickly that changes from us being suck and all the work we do. No one knows what we're doing up there, right?
Right.
To being the best. Just by the information that little sentence I gave them changed his whole perception and probably changed his day of how lucky he was to get in, as opposed to thinking I'm pissed off because I'm late now.
That's powerful right there, because that we probably changed that person's life. I mean, think about, he's probably sitting there, someone saying like, talking to somebody like, I was really thinking this and then I realized this. So when that happens enough times, for you, for me, for the rest of the world, we start to get insight, and now we realize this is one of the reasons why I live my message. I was on a podcast recently and somebody said, well, I'm sure you get angry and you go off every once in a while. I said, listen, I experience anger. Absolutely. That's a human emotion. The difference is, no, I don't go off once in a while. Like, I understand how to control it. I master my craft. Like, this is what I dedicate my life to, is mastering my emotions. So you can't get me angry on the road, but because someone cuts me off on the road, how do I know they're not, flying to go see their child in the hospital? Like,
Right.
how do we know? And so I talk about the difference between what's called the cartoon world. This is the way we think the world should be. That's our world of shoulds. And then the real world, how the world actually is. And we get angry, we get upset, we get so much turmoil in our lives because we spend so much of our lives in our cartoon world. Well, people should think, feel, believe, behave the way I think they should. And then they really, but the people aren't letting you down, because the world is what the world is. So the majority of my career, I teach people to align their expectations with reality, because the more prepared you are for reality, the more effectively you're going to handle it. If you walk in and you realize there's always another side to the box, it really helps you lead with humility. And when you lead with humility, I always tell people it's better to be humble than to be humbled. So if you can walk in with a little bit more humility, it'd probably be beneficial for you.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, this has been amazing. I've got just a couple questions for you that I always try to ask our guests, because I always like to understand where they're at and where they're going. So the first question is what's next for you? You've done amazing things. I mean, you've changed thousands of lives, if not more. Are you at the pinnacle? What's next for someone like you?
So right now, I feel grateful that my theory has been adopted by Pennsylvania correction systems. I am taking this yield theory out and training police officers and military personnel. And I think the next step is I'm building an international yield theory institute, where I want to have a cadre of trainers, of people who really understand and practice yield theory, not just, regurgitate it, but really understand it. And one of the key aspects to yield theory is non-attachment. So that's something you've got to really live for a while. And I'm building this International Yield Theory Institute, where we're going to take it all over the world. And I really want to spread yield theory, as throughout the whole world. That's really what's my biggest part that's next for me.
So going on that, what would you say when you're done, right? When you are retired and you're sitting there and you're kind of looking out at the meadow and sun setting, what do you want to be known for? Like, what do you want your name to be attached to?
I love that question, because I think that when I was young, I remember I'd go through so many, well, I wanted to be an athlete, and then I wanted to be a poet. I want to be remembered for something that I wrote. I really would like to have left a legacy on shining a light and insight for people on how they can find peace. And I mean that in a very profound way, like to really be able to recognize that I was a teacher who could hold up a mirror for people and help people get through really tough situations. And when I say this stuff about peace, like I can hear myself on the outside, what that might project or what people might sound like. My book is, that one book I have is called Walking Through Anger, and it's about facing it head on. It's not about, listen, there was a king, he had this contest in this kingdom. He said, I want somebody to paint me peace. So all these artists, they came up with these peaceful pictures of, saints and monks and all this stuff, or flowers and nature scenes. So finally, the day of the contest came, and he looked, and the people who were doing the contest, they saw there was one painting in there that looked like a storm or something, and they were getting ready to pick it up and hurry up and hide it. But the king looked at it. He said, "Oh, what's that?" And he looked, and here's this image of a ship. It's in the middle of a tremendous storm, and there are things flying over the sail, over the boat, the thunder, the lightning's coming down. You can see this storm. People were falling off the boats. You look like they're in agony. And they say, why would he want to look at this? And he looked, and there was a bird on the bough. And when you looked at the bird, his face was calm. And the king said, that's it. That's the painting that truly experiences peace. Because it's not about having everything serene around you and having everybody live in your cartoon world. It's about being able to be in control of yourself regardless of what is happening around you. And if at the end of this, as my time, if I can leave a legacy that holds up a mirror for the world to help them gain insight, to learn their psyches more deeply, I would love to have that kind of impact. I would.
Wow. That is very powerful. That's I'm gonna have to get your book now. I want to read it. I want to hear. I want to learn more about you and how you think, because I think it's so impactful and so powerful. One last question for you: if you could have, again, whatever your choice is, a whiskey, a beer, wine, or coffee or water, with a person who's dead, alive, imaginary, whatever, who would that person be, and what would you talk to them about?
And if I'm not bringing if it's not like the only conversation, so it's my wife and daughter, because I truly love being present with them and I enjoy that time more than anything. If it's somebody from history in the past, I think I would really love to have sat down with the Buddha. I would love to have some conversations with him. I think the way he lived and didn't put his stuff on others, but yet taught an approach that is still being used today, 2,600 years later. I'd love to talk. I would love to sit down and talk with him for sure.
Yeah, that would be an interesting conversation for sure, for sure. Well, Christian Conte, Dr. Christian Conte, first of all, I just want to really personally thank you for coming on the show. I know you're busy and you've got a lot going on, and we actually took a whole hour. So we got a lot of information. I actually had, as you can tell, I'm sure that I had a lot of personal things I wanted to learn. And that's why I was peppering you with these questions. And without a doubt, you answered them amazingly well. So I want to thank you. And obviously for all the guests that are people that are watching, how can people find you, track you? I mean, I'm sure I looked you up and saw everything, but is there a place that they can go to find you and follow you?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing I like to give people is the YouTube channel. So it's just Dr. Christian Conte at YouTube, because there's free videos, it's free resources. So there's that. My website's Dr. Christian Conte. My daughter just got me on TikTok, so it's really funny. I said, I'm not going to do another social media thing. And she said, I said, if you want to do it, you can put me on. So she'll ask me questions. So I just got on TikTok. But all that social media stuff is just Dr. Christian Conte, except Twitter. Twitter's Dr._Conte. But yeah, I think that's great. I'd love for people to check out the things I wrote. Even though my book is called Walking Through Anger, my wife is frustrated with that title because she said it's so much more than anger. And if you like the way I speak with the Zen tales and teaching stories, I tell probably over 100 in there. So there's a lot of stuff to draw on. So I'd say Walking Through Anger would be a great place. I'd love people to check out, and YouTube. But I also want to say thank you to you. I mean, you and I vibed really quickly when we met on the phone. And then I said, I just can see that we've had very similar paths. And I think that's so cool. It's a beautiful thing. First time I did an international conference, I just finished my PhD. I'm like 30 years old, and I'm thinking, like, I don't belong with all these people. Like, these people are doctors. Like, I just literally papers wet, you know? And so I got there, and then when they started talking from all these different countries, they started talking about counseling. I knew counseling. And it gave me confidence, because I said, well, I know my field. I mean, I read 5 books a week for years. I said, I know my field. And that was a very powerful experience. And I'm bringing it up in this moment because, like, when I meet people who we never met before, then we finally meet, and we've come into a similar path of personal growth, of dedication to something that is very meaningful to us, and then leaving a legacy where we can help other people. I think that's really a beautiful experience. So I'm grateful to have met you, for you to invite me on here. I believe we'll be connected. We'll continue to do some stuff together for sure.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, again, thank you for coming on today. And for everyone that was listening or watching on all the different channels, thank you for being on High Stakes with Steve Rozenberg. Please make sure you subscribe, give me a review, share this out with everyone, because I think it's the messages that you're going to hear here on these shows are going to be very impactful, and they're going to be something from a different twist and a different angle that you probably have not heard of, different questions, different answers that'll make you give yourself different responses in life, in business, and in everything else. So on behalf of Dr. Conte and myself, Steve Rozenberg, thank you for watching, listening to High Stakes with Steve Rozenberg, and we will catch you all next time. Bye-bye.